Think you need to be a millionaire to buy your first home? Think again. Buying a house these days feels impossible, right? It seems like prices are ridiculously high. Saving for a deposit is this huge, scary number, and getting approved for a mortgage seems harder than climbing Mount Everest. But what if I told you it's actually easier than you think, especially with a brand new home? I'm Josh, a builder here in New Zealand, and today we're going to talk to Simon from Mortgage HQ, and we're going to discuss in depth all the ins and outs of going through the mortgage process. Am I allowed to get takeaways this Friday and still apply for a mortgage?
The short answer is yes, yeah.
Stick around to the end of the video where we'll break down exactly how much you need. But first, let's talk about the main difference between buying an existing home and why a new home is easier. Quick disclaimer, this is just general info and you need to talk to a financial advisor. You know what's crazy is that we're going to dig into it a bit more with Simon, but new builds only require as little as a 5% deposit, whereas an existing house off the market requires up to a 20% deposit. So if you've got two houses that are the same price, let's say they're both worth 600K, this one here you only need 30K deposit, whereas this one here you need 120K deposit. That's a huge difference. So you can see why for a first home buyer, it might be really hard to generate 120K deposit. But if you're allowed to use your KiwiSaver and you only need 30K, it's actually a very achievable first step. Another crazy fact is that some lenders see new builds as a less risky product. There's a number of reasons behind that. Part of it is that there's a 10-year warranty for everything along the way. There's a lot better consenting conditions right now, and it's just a more favorable product that's been promoted from the top level of government down. And that means that new builds qualify for special incentives that existing lending doesn't. We have got Simon from Mortgage HQ on board today to talk about all the ins and outs of getting a mortgage. Thanks for joining us, Simon. Tell us, am I allowed to get takeaways this Friday and still apply for a mortgage?
The short answer is yes, yeah. It's been fearmongered in the media. You've heard this, you can't have your avocado on toast or your coffees. Hopefully by the end of today's podcast, we should be able to demystify that myth.
Yeah, I would love to see that. The more Kiwis that own homes, the better. And realizing that it's a possible dream, if we can convey that message today, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
From what I understand, a mortgage is not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? You've got new builds and existing houses, you've got different deposit requirements. What makes up some of those differences?
I think the biggest difference for new builds versus existing is the deposit requirements. You know, banks are a little bit more lenient on how much deposit you need to bring to the table. And so that puts a lot of faith for the clients that are coming through, especially with people that don't have, the bank of mum and dad, and can utilize the likes of their KiwiSaver and some minimal savings to go towards starting the purchase of their first home.
I've heard that you could go as low as 5% deposit on a new build.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of politics is pushing for the increase of the housing stock. There is leniency for new builds in terms of the amount of low deposit loans issued towards those types of properties.
Let's go back to this 5% deposit. Am I allowed to use my KiwiSaver?
Yeah, you can use a KiwiSaver, you can use gift from mum and dad, and you can use genuine savings towards the 5% deposit.
Okay, so that's 3 ways I can create a deposit. That's crazy. You know what else is crazy? That only 22% of you are subscribed to NZ Builder. Guys, what are the other 78% of you up to? Go ahead, click subscribe. It really encourages us to keep making content like this. How do we access KiwiSaver?
In short, there's a withdrawal form that you have to fill out through your provider. It's not necessarily for people that have just purchasing their first home. It can be for someone who's in a similar situation as someone who's purchasing their first home. For example, they've recently gone through a breakup and they're purchasing another home outside of that. They would be considered someone that's purchasing their first home.
That's great to know. So how much of your KiwiSaver can you pull out?
The short answer is almost the entire amount. The providers will impose you leave $1,000 in there, and that's representative of the $1,000 that was deposited by the government at the beginning of your KiwiSaver scheme.
Nice. Let's say we've got a 25-year-old viewer. How would we guide them through the process?
Anything new is hard. Anything going along through the process by yourself is even harder. So get a good team around you. And that's what financial advisors do. They provide that advice and support.
If you've never ever had to pick a mortgage broker, how do you know a good one from a bad one?
Well, it's similar to like going to a good restaurant these days. You know, the ratings online is a really good way to figure that out.
That's a really good point. I like to say no one wants to eat at a quiet restaurant, right? You want to dine out where everyone is.
Yeah, don't trust a skinny chef.
Yeah, good point. For a first home buyer, what type of contract is more likely to get across the line, a turnkey or a progress payment?
If you drill down into the detail, I'd probably say the turnkey is easier. And the fixed price contracts, as you can probably know as a builder, a lot of clients making some adjustments after the fixed price contract or after the plans have been approved. So the banks actually apply anywhere between 10 to 20% margin in the lending to ensure that they can afford that. So in short, fixed price contracts from a servicing perspective is probably a little bit harder.
Good to know. Let's touch on Bank of Mum and Dad for a second. How does that work?
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We prefer a outright gift.
How would you advise someone to go about that conversation?
Probably engage us first. We provide that first financial strategy session for free. And after it, we provide a disclosure and a statement of your current position with a breakdown of options. That's going to be a really good piece of paperwork or email that you can forward to your parents to start that conversation.
So we've talked about the Bank of Mum and Dad, we've talked about KiwiSaver, and the last way to put your deposit together for most first-home buyers would be their own personal savings, right?
That's right.
Without telling someone how to suck eggs, what is some of the tricks to build that little nest egg up?
Yeah, I would say additional voluntary contributions to your KiwiSaver is a great way to do it. It's a professionally managed fund. We put a plan in place that will usually involve increasing the KiwiSaver contributions to allow them to get into their first home purchase faster.
That's great advice. And essentially, because from what I understand, you can ramp your contributions right up to 8 or 10%. Is that right?
Even further, yeah.
And it's almost like a forced savings scheme that skims it right off the top. You don't even see it in your bank account. So you don't even have to think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest things. What we're finding in a lot of people with keeping to a budget is a lot of times it's psychological. People have this bad habit. Money comes into your account, you spend it until it's gone, and then you start eating 2-minute noodles, for the rest of the week until the pay comes in again. And so if we can trick that by putting metrics in place that it's automated, that really helps people save.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely like that in my 20s. I can definitely feel that payday comes around and your big night out, and then you pay the rent, and then you're poor for the rest of the week. I think no matter which way you cut it up, you've got to find a way to gamify it for yourself and work out your strengths and weaknesses.
50-50, right? You spend 50% of the additional income as if you're going to live for the next year, and 50% as if you're going to live for the next 50 years, 100 years. You satisfy that side of the brain where you're like, I've worked so hard for this. And instead of throwing it all against the wall, you put some towards, rewarding yourself, which motivates further behavior in that trajectory.
That's a great tip though. So if you're 25 and you're watching this and you're about to get a pay rise, put 50% towards your current self and improving your current life, and put 50% towards your future self and your future dreams. Another thing that comes through often is I've got a student loan, I've got an HP, I might have some court fines. I had court fines when I bought my first house. How does that affect the overall package?
It's not to say that you won't be ready because you've got debts, but it's part of the overall picture that we look at. We want to ensure that you're not paying too much on debts, and if there's an ability to consolidate and reduce the interest rates, for example, then we can do so.
I actually had that experience. They bundled up my court fines, they bundled up my student loan, they paid off the credit card and tied it into one big, gigantic mortgage.
It's important to note that there is so much variety in people's specific circumstances, and by working that through with a financial advisor, you're going to be able to find a plan that works for you.
Yeah, I like the saying, if you fail to plan, your plan is to fail. And so if your plan is to own a home one day, but you don't have a meeting with a mortgage broker or come up with a guide to reducing some of your debts, such as student loans, then that plan will always just be a one-day thing. So let's say, hypothetically, we've got a 2-bedroom townhouse on the market and it's a new build and it's a turnkey product. What kind of situation would I need to be in to afford to put an offer on that?
You'd need to speak to a financial advisor, see whether or not your income matches the serviceability. You would have to have a minimum of 5% deposit.
So the 5% deposit's real easy. 600K house, you're going to need about 30K from Bank of Mum and Dad, KiwiSaver or cash. The serviceability bit sounds a bit scary, but in real broad numbers, what's kind of like a good base salary you need to be on? Let's say this person's paying $700 a week rent already in the market.
I would say, assuming no children, no debts, you'd probably, to be able to service $570,000 worth of a mortgage on a $600,000 purchase, 90,000 combined. Yeah, that could be done.
Okay, so that's actually pretty achievable. You could be on a living wage and almost hitting that. What I'm trying to demonstrate is that you don't need to be a gazillionaire to make this happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I'm hearing is that if you're paying rent and you and your partner are earning around 90K, and you've both been in KiwiSaver for a couple of years, you most likely can already buy a house off the market.
100%.
So that means you right now watching, if you're hitting those numbers, you should be working out your path to home ownership.
Yeah, it's absolutely an achievable goal. It does mean that your expenses are going to go up. If you want to live in $1 million home in Auckland, it's going to cost less to rent it than it is to purchase it. However, you don't get the capital gain over the long term. This is the main thing that I find a lot of people come to us, especially the younger guys. They say, well, why would I purchase? Well, if you project, say, even minute capital gains, you're in a way better position in 5-10 years' time.
Yeah, also you could buy one house and live in it for 30 years and your mortgage is going to stay like this or ideally go down. And over 30 years, rent and your price of your house is going to go up and up and up.
Correct.
You could make one move once and lock in a place to live forever. I'm not a financial advisor and this is not financial advice. Always speak to a registered mortgage broker or financial advisor before making any decisions about buying a home or taking on a mortgage. Yo, sign off squad, you've made it to the end. Thanks so much. I actually loved that chat with Simon and got so much out of it. It reminded me of young 19-year-old Josh going through the process. You know what's crazy is I've gone through the process a few times now and it never gets any less like, are they gonna give me the loan? And I still feel like there's times where I've gone through it and they're gonna pull the rug out from under me and say, surprise, you can't do it. One of the things I have learned is just being resilient and coming up with a plan and trusting the plan. A good plan has room for flexibility. So work out, where is your goal? I wanna buy a home or I wanna build a new home. How much money am I gonna need? Where am I currently? And then what's the bridge to your goal? And just break it down step by step. And as you're going through the process, just keep giving the documentation over and ask, what do I need to do to be in a better position? You don't know if you don't ask. Start asking the questions, fill out your details in the form below, and we will point you in the right direction.